In this video, everyone, we compare the first generation Smart ForTwo, so the 450 as it's known, to the Smart ForTwo second generation 451. So this particular Smart ForTwo Gen 1 is a passion spec. It's a 2006 and it's instantly recognisable, the smart car, I'm sure you would agree. If you compare it to, say, the Fiat 500, the 2CV, the VW Beetle, etc. An easily recognisable car. You see it on the road and you know it's a smart car. Originally launched in 1998. This particular one has a 699cc engine, 3 cylinders, turbocharged, 61 horsepower, and should do up to 70 miles to the gallon. There's also a Brabus version with 74 horsepower that does 61 miles per gallon, and there's a diesel 799cc that has 40 horsepower and can do 83 to the gallon. Early models actually had a 599cc petrol engine, but this one has a 699cc. Now the engine itself in the Generation 1 is made by Mercedes, and they're good for about 70,000 miles, plus or minus, depending on the service history. And that is according to a smart specialist website called Evolution, and I'm going to put a link to it below. It's a really good website. Some of the information on there is free, some of it you would have to pay for, but the link will take you to something that you can see that is completely free. So the length for the Gen 1 is 2,500 millimeters and the width is 1,515 millimeters. You have the Tritium safety cell, which on this particular one is the silver, as you can see there. The boot is 150 litres and the mirrors are quite small. Access to washer fluids and brake fluid is actually a little tricky. I'll show you that now. So on this side you turn the screw clockwise to release. On this side you turn the screw anti-clockwise to release. So the first thing to note when we get inside the first generation Smart is the seats. Well, they're quite close together and the passenger seat is set back from the driver's seat to try and avoid the shoulders rubbing against each other. If we take a look at the dashboard on the first generation, we'll see quite simple speedometer, fuel gauge on the left, temperature gauge on the right, and if you're of a certain age like me, if you have a look at those little blobs indicating the fuel and the temperature, does it remind you of anything? It reminds me of old paraffin heaters. Let me know in the comments if you know what I'm saying. So it clearly shows what gear you're in. To display the outside temperature, there is a button to the side of the instrument binnacle. You press it, scroll through, and then it will show you the outside temperature. This particular car is fitted with the additional clock and rev counter. Now the controls in the Generation 1, they feel really sturdy. They got a good feel to them, very tactile. And then of course you've got a cubby hole and you've got the option of fitting different items down there. This particular one has got another storage and CD rack and a cup holder. The ignition key is behind the gear lever between the seats, and some models have a button at the side that simply changes it from semi-automatic, where you have to move the lever forward to change up a gear and move it back to change down a gear. If you press it instead, it says A for auto. But on the Generation 1, if you leave it in auto, when you turn the car off and you turn the car back on, it defaults back to being in semi-automatic mode, so you have to remember to press it every single time you restart the car to put it into automatic. There's no glove box on the Generation 1, and there is a boot release just underneath on the right hand side. This Smart ForTwo is the second generation, known as the 451, still instantly recognisable as a smart car of course. Launched late 2006. This particular example is a 2011 model with a 999cc 3-cylinder turbocharged 84 horsepower engine, good for 68 miles to the gallon. There's also an MHD version, which stands for mild hybrid drive, which is 71 horsepower and 70 miles to the gallon. You can have a diesel with 54 horsepower and 85 miles to the gallon, and a Brabus with 102 horsepower that still achieves 64 miles to the gallon. This particular model has got the Mitsubishi engine, good for about 200,000 miles. Again, I'll put a link to the Evolution website in the description below that discusses the reliability of both the Generation 1 and the Generation 2. So the length on this one is 2,695 millimeters, so a little bit longer, and the width is 1,752 millimeters, so a little bit wider, which affords a little bit better interior space, of course. And the boot is much better at 220 litres. Access to the washer, brake and coolant is easier. Just pull the levers by either side at the edge of the radiator grille. Pull from the bottom. Pull forward. Here we have a strap, and here we have two hooks to hook it on to the front of the car. Refitting is a reverse of removal. Clip the top part of the bonnet back in, push down and close the locating pegs. 1 and 2. Check it's secure. All done. And the mirrors are much bigger, much easier to use, more like a standard car. It is a Passion model, the same as the first generation over there, but this one was spec'd at factory with some Brabus extras, so the standard Passion would not come with those wheels. Moving inside, we see that Generation 2 has a little bit more space, a little bit more gap between the passenger and the driver, but again the seat is set further back so you don't bump shoulders. The dashboard, nice and simple, speedo across the top, what gear you're in the middle. Fuel gauge on this one is along the bottom. A little bit more information on the screen because it's telling you the outside temperature, but importantly the Generation 2 does not have an engine temperature gauge, which is okay in normal use, but we said earlier about an engine option called the MHD, or mild hybrid drive. If you have one with the MHD and the belt fails, the engine will overheat very quickly. The car will still drive. You should get a warning light to say that the belt has failed, but you will not know that the temperature is increasing very quickly. You really need to pull up when it's safe to do so and turn the engine off. So again, on this car we have the clocks. For the ventilation, the controls on the Generation 2, well, they just feel really flimsy. They feel very cheap. They're not as satisfying to use as a Generation 1. Then moving down, in this particular one we have the cup holder, of course. We have an ignition key behind the gear lever. And again, we have a button on the side to change it from semi-automatic to automatic. But on the Generation 2, it will remember what you've chosen when you turn the engine off and when you turn it back on, so you do not have to keep pressing the button to put it into automatic when you get into a Generation 2 Smart ForTwo. And there's a glove box. In the Generation 2 there is no electronic boot release. How can you tell whether the smart car you're looking at is a 450 first generation or a 451 second generation? Well, if you open the boot and look just past the engine cover on the right hand side, you will find there is a VIN number, and the VIN number will start WME, and it will either say 450 or 451. So in summary, what we're saying on this video, everyone, is the 451, well, it's bigger, it's a little bit more practical, it rides smoother over the bumps, the gearbox change is a little smoother and a little quicker, it's definitely more reliable with that Mitsubishi engine. It is almost better on paper in every single way. And so which one do you think I'm going to choose? Well, it's quite obvious, isn't it? After all what we've said, I'd actually pick the first generation 450.